Thanks, Bob. And I want to speak first to acknowledge each of the people here who are part of the Coalition for Capital Homesteading and thank them for their understanding that there are new ideas that can shape the future of America and the future of the world. Money is power. If you control money, you can control power. And we're here before the Fed because it is an institution created by human beings, not by God, that can control the flow of money in America and affect money flows throughout the world, and therefore affect poverty and powerlessness of most citizens of the world. The top 1% in America own over 90% of all productive capital, the wealth-producing capital. This is important because we have to look at what's changing in the world. What makes today's world different from the world of a century ago, 2 centuries ago, 10,000 years ago? Human beings have not evolved. We're pretty much the same as what we were before. But we have been able to invent tools. First, very primitive tools, and now very advanced tools. New energy systems can be financed so that we don't have to depend on oil and other fossil fuels, but you must have a way to finance them. And if you finance them, you have to worry about who's going to own them. Under today's monetary policies of the Federal Reserve, most of the growth will flow to the top 1% of Americans who own more than the bottom 90% combined. What's the answer? The answer is not to be found in the welfare state, in socialism, under communism, or under the Wall Street model of capitalism. Under these systems of the past, power gets concentrated, and no power is more concentrated than in the building behind us, because they are able to control the money system. Good morning, Chairman Bernanke. Liberate all Americans. Rethink your PhD dissertation, your books that tell you how to finance the growth into the same hands as before. It's time, Chairman Bernanke, to wake up, to begin looking at new ideas, ideas from the giants like Louis Kelso, my mentor, and Mortimer Adler, one of the great thinkers, great philosophers of America. Think about Buckminster Fuller and his ideas on how you can build a world in which everyone can be empowered. Redesign the tools of the world, the energy slaves, to do more and more with less and less human talent. Bucky could design new cities if you could finance them, new technologies if you could finance them, the energy slaves if you could finance them. And then look at Father William Ferree, one of the great thinkers who introduced ideas of social justice. The late Senator Russell Long, who listened to Kelso and myself back in November 27th, 1973, and he became a champion of credit so that workers who were propertyless could become owners without having anything, without having any savings, all done on credit, repaid out of the future savings. Where did that idea start? Well, it goes way back. Michael Graney will talk a little bit about it, but there was a giant thinker here in Washington who headed up the Brookings Institution from 1916 to 1952, Dr. Harold Moulton, who wrote a book called The Formation of Capital. He challenged Keynes. He challenged the prevailing ideas. He said it makes no sense to finance new capital out of savings. It's better that those who have the savings spend it, because then producers will come up to supply that. So he wrote in the book called A Formation of Capital, a way to finance growth out of future savings. Chairman Bernanke, it's time for you to read. Read The Formation of Capital. Learn from that. Have all your advisors learn from that, because there is a way to finance growth so that every citizen can become an owner. It's up to you, Chairman Bernanke, whether you're going to monetize unproductive, speculative paper that almost pulled down the global economy, and begin to see that it's important to focus on production, not speculation, because that's all you did. You bailed out with several $billion. You printed new money to bail out Wall Street. If Wall Street made a mistake, well then let us correct that mistake. How do you correct that mistake? Go through bankruptcy and reorganization law, reorganize, wipe down the bad debt, and start over again. But that's not enough. The Capital Homestead Act is a total change of economic policy. It would have tax policy change. I'll give you an example of what that would mean. First of all, from a tax standpoint, no family of four would have to pay a penny in payroll taxes. No company would have to pay payroll taxes. No family of four would have to pay a penny of income taxes until they had at least $100,000, because that's the exemption. Beyond that, tax income from all sources, not favored sources for the rich, as President Obama is now proposing. We want a system where you can balance the budget, not reduce deficits, eliminate deficits, and begin to pay down the existing debt. I'll give you an example of how bad it is. The Social Security and Medicare system and all the entitlements, government retirement rights, these are not on the books of the federal government. That amounts, as you project ahead as to what it's going to cost our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, it's right now the present value of all of the debt, the obligations from entitlements, is over $480,000 per household. Think about that. A newborn baby is going to be born with a debt over its head of at least $480,000, according to the Peterson Foundation. These were numbers that were supplied by the Comptroller General of the United States, David Walker. So these are not unknown numbers. But the tax system that could be solved through a single rate of taxation that would balance the budget and force the politicians to go back to the people to say they can supply better government, a government that doesn't oppress the people, a government that will supply justice to all the people in a way that we can grow the economy and keep money in people's pockets so that they can pay their own education and health, food, housing, because the present system is creating a larger and larger gap, and many people live from hand to mouth. They have no savings, nothing to invest. We have a way in which they can invest. And who can bring that about? The Federal Reserve. It should set an example for all the central banks in the world. America is, as Lincoln said, the last best hope of mankind. And the Federal Reserve, more than any institution in America, is largely responsible for the powerlessness of most citizens. It's time for Chairman Bernanke and other members of the Federal Reserve to wake up. The solution is in the Federal Reserve right now. Section 13, paragraph 2, the Federal Reserve was supposed to create credit for local bankers to make loans where there wasn't enough savings in the system. It's in the law. They don't use it. This was the original way of financing growth of industry, agriculture, and commerce in America. In each of the 12 regional banks, they were able to be a source. The discount window of the Federal Reserve would be a source of monetizing private sector growth. What happened was, in 1917 and 18, we were in a war, and we moved away from an asset-backed currency backed by private sector assets, capital assets, to a government debt-backed paper. In other words, the government doesn't produce anything. The government, when it goes into deficits, they didn't want to have the taxpayer pay for the war, so they simply issued treasury paper. And then they went and shut down the 11 feds. The only one that has any power is the New York Fed, where the speculators were able to buy the paper for government debt. They called the Open Markets Committee, and they took that paper and then went back to the Fed, and behind the currency are no assets, only debt. Not good debt, not good credit, bad credit. As I said, the hidden debt is up to close to 500,000 per household. We have to turn the ship around. We must reverse ourselves. We have to get away from the ideas of the past, open their minds of the Federal Reserve to new ideas. It's time for the American people to wake up and to demand that we don't end the Fed, as the Tea Party people would say, and Ron Paul would say, or turn the Fed over to the Treasury, as the people on the left would say, as Dennis Kucinich and other Congress people on the left. They want to have the Treasury, the politicians, in control of the money machine. We say no, no. Let the citizens in each of the 12 regions be the owners of the Fed, so that money power now will flow from the bottom up, not from the top down. Not for consumer credit, not for credit that doesn't pay for itself, not for non-productive uses of credit, but for credit, for productive uses of credit, to grow the economy, to expand the economy's rate of growth, absorb all the people who are unemployed, but not just for jobs. We're not interested in creating a new form of slavery, which we have today. Most Americans don't recognize that the present world is a world where most people are slaves, either welfare slaves, or certainly wage slaves, and debt slaves. They get the wrong kind of debt, or tax slaves. Well, how can we liberate a nation of slaves? Well, we liberate them by first turning to Benjamin Bernanke, the chairman of the Fed. Wake up, Ben! Wake up and listen to the people. I thank you very much for the opportunity to challenge the Fed to reason, to new thinking. This is the 7th annual meeting before the Fed. We've always asked for a meeting with the chairman. We sent a letter to him. No response at all. Now, this is a institution that exists by the consent of the people. It is it's a legal tool. It's a social tool, and therefore the power over the Fed has to be returned to the people. Thank you very, very much.